What if the oldest secret in religion is that the world's religions were never meant to compete in the first place? What if the priests of Egypt, the philosophers of Greece, the sages of India, the mystics of Christianity, the masters of Sufism, the Kabbalists, alchemists, and initiates of secret orders were all circling the same center, using different symbols to describe one reality too vast for ordinary language? That is the strange and powerful idea behind the perennial philosophy. And once you see it, a lot of history stops looking like a collection of disconnected beliefs and starts looking like fragments of a single shattered mirror. But that idea is more dangerous than it first appears, because if there really is a timeless truth behind all traditions, then modern people may have lost far more than rituals and myths. They may have lost a way of seeing reality itself. The perennial philosophy is the view that beneath the outer forms of religions and sacred traditions, there exists a universal metaphysical truth. Not a cheap slogan that says all religions are identical, and not a lazy claim that doctrines do not matter, but something more subtle. The outer forms differ, sometimes radically. Their stories, symbols, laws, languages, and historical missions are not the same. But at a deeper level, many of them seem to affirm similar principles. They affirm that reality has a sacred source, that the human being contains a spark or image of that source, that ordinary consciousness is limited or fallen, and that through discipline, purification, contemplation, initiation, or grace, a human being can awaken to a higher order of truth. In my opinion, this is where many people misunderstand the subject. They hear the term perennial philosophy and imagine a modern spiritual blend, as if someone just mixed religions together and called it wisdom. But that is not really the core of it. The real claim is much older and much more demanding. It says, truth is one, even when its garments are many. And that means the work is not to flatten traditions into a blur, but to learn how to see through form without disrespecting form. The roots of this idea stretch back into the ancient world, long before the term itself existed. In archaic and pagan civilizations, the cosmos was not seen as a dead machine. It was alive, ordered, symbolic, and filled with intelligible meaning. In Egypt, temple ritual reflected celestial order. In the Greek mysteries, initiation was not entertainment or moral theater, but participation in hidden realities. In Orphic and Pythagorean traditions, the soul was understood as something more than the body, bound to a greater cosmic harmony. In these worlds, myth was not merely fiction. Myth was a vessel. It carried truths that could not be reduced to ordinary speech. That point matters because the perennial philosophy depends on a way of reading symbols that modern culture often forgets. Ancient people were not necessarily naive because they spoke in mythic language. In many cases, they were preserving insights that later ages tried to restate in philosophy, theology, and esotericism. The gods of the old pagan worlds were often not just tribal personalities in the sky, but expressions of principles, powers, patterns, and layers of reality. This is one reason so many esoteric traditions later treated pagan symbolism with seriousness rather than embarrassment. Then came the Greeks, and something profound happened. The intuition of hidden order began to take on a clearer philosophical form. Pythagoras suggested that number and proportion underlie the visible world. Plato argued that what we see is not the highest reality, but a shadow of intelligible forms. The visible world changes, decays, and deceives, while the real is more stable, more perfect, and more fundamental. Later, Plotinus and the Neoplatonists pushed this even further. For Plotinus, all things flow from the One, the ineffable source beyond being. Itself, and the soul's task is to return upward through purification and contemplation. That pattern of emanation and return became one of the deepest structures in the Western esoteric imagination. And this is where the story gets even more interesting, because the same broad pattern appears far beyond Greece. In the Upanishads of India, the deepest self, Atman, is linked to Brahman, the ultimate reality. The spiritual problem is ignorance, not merely bad behavior. What binds the soul is a false identification with the surface level of existence. In Vedanta, liberation comes through direct realization of the real. In Buddhism, the language changes, the metaphysics shift, and the doctrine of self is treated very differently, yet the structure of awakening remains. Ordinary consciousness is captive to illusion, craving, and misperception, and liberation requires transformation, not just belief. In Taoism, wisdom is found in alignment with the way, the underlying principle that cannot be grasped by forceful intellect alone. Different traditions reach different conclusions in some respects, but again and again the same pattern emerges. Surface life conceals a deeper order, and the human being can be remade by discovering it. If you have made it this far, take a second to like the video, because this is exactly the kind of subject that deserves more careful attention online. Most people only hear the simplified version, and the real story is far richer. In the Western esoteric stream, the perennial idea found especially fertile ground in Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, and Christian mysticism. The Hermetic writings presented a universe bound together by correspondences, where the human being stands between worlds and can come to know the divine through inner awakening. Gnostic currents, despite their diversity, often emphasized that salvation comes through a kind of sacred knowledge, not mere external conformity. Kabbalah described creation as a structured unfolding from divine source into multiple levels of manifestation, offering a map that linked cosmos, soul, and God. And within Christianity, especially in its mystical and esoteric currents, many thinkers saw Scripture itself as layered with literal, moral, symbolic, and spiritual meanings. So when later initiatic traditions looked at religion, they did not only ask what a text says, they asked what level it was speaking from. That is a very different way of reading. It assumes sacred traditions encode truths in multiple registers at once. This is one reason secret societies and initiatic orders have often been drawn to perennial ideas. For them, the symbol is not decoration, it is a key. The temple is not just a building, it is a diagram of the soul. The journey is not just historical, it is inward. During the Renaissance, this vision returned with enormous force. Thinkers like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola believed that ancient wisdom traditions contained fragments of a primordial truth, sometimes called Prisca Theologia, or the ancient theology. They tried to reconcile Platonism, Hermeticism, Christian theology, and aspects of Kabbalah into a larger sacred synthesis. Later, Agostino Stucco used the term Philosophia perennis, and the idea gradually became more explicit in European thought. Leibniz would also use the expression, seeing in it the notion of an enduring wisdom that persists beneath historical variation. But the perennial philosophy was never just an academic theory. In initiatic circles, it became a practical map. Rosicrucian thought treated hidden wisdom as medicine for the soul and for civilization. Esoteric Masonry, at least in some of its more symbolic and contemplative interpretations, saw ritual as a process of inner construction, a rebuilding of the fallen temple within the self. Alchemy, when read esoterically, was not only about substances in a laboratory, it was about transmutation of the practitioner, the purification of perception, the union of opposites, and the birth of a more integrated consciousness. This is how initiates tend to understand the matter in practice. They do not collect symbols the way tourists collect souvenirs. They work with them. A serious practitioner may meditate on a single image, a pillar, a star, a tree, a rose, a cross, or a geometric form. They do this not because the object has magical value by itself, but because it concentrates vision. It trains the mind to Perceive relationships between levels of reality. It turns attention from distraction toward essence. And over time, the point is not to become a walking encyclopedia of esoteric systems. The point is to become different. For me, that is where the perennial philosophy becomes truly compelling. It stops being a comparative theory about religions and becomes a challenge to the person studying it. Are you searching for information, or are you actually willing to be transformed by what you claim to? Admire? Because those are not the same thing. In the modern period, several major authors gave this idea new life. Rene Guenon argued that the modern world had fallen into spiritual amnesia, losing access to principial knowledge and reducing reality to quantity, materialism, and fragmentation. Frithjof Schuon developed the idea of the transcendent unity of religions, insisting that authentic traditions differ outwardly while sharing an inner metaphysical core. Ananda Coomaraswamy explored sacred symbolism and traditional art as expressions of universal truths. Aldous Huxley introduced the phrase perennial philosophy to a broad modern audience, presenting it as the highest common factor in the world's spiritual teachings. Even Carl Jung, though not a perennialist in the strict sense, helped modern readers take symbols, archetypes, and inner transformation seriously again. Still, there are important criticisms, and they should be taken seriously. Some scholars argue that perennialism oversimplifies traditions, forcing deep differences into a single mold. And honestly, that critique matters. It is true that religions do not all say the same thing in the same way. Their doctrines, methods, and ultimate claims can diverge sharply. A serious understanding of the perennial philosophy has to respect that. Otherwise, it becomes vague spiritual sentimentalism. The strongest version of the perennial view is not that all traditions are interchangeable, but that many authentic traditions participate in a truth greater than their historical form, even while preserving distinctions that should not be erased. That may be the hardest part for modern people to accept. We are used to two options. Either one religion is right and the others are wrong, or all religions are basically the same and nothing matters very much. The perennial philosophy rejects both simplifications. It says the sacred is real, forms matter, and differences matter, but so does the hidden unity behind them. And that unity is not grasped by opinion alone. It requires discipline, humility, and a change in being. So what does this look like in ordinary life? Usually, it begins with a shift in perception. A person starts reading sacred texts less like arguments to win and more like mirrors of consciousness. They begin to treat ritual, prayer, meditation, moral discipline, silence, and symbolic study as technologies of remembrance. They stop asking only what they believe and start asking what they are becoming. Someone influenced by this worldview might study multiple traditions without reducing them to a blur, noticing recurring structures like ascent, death and rebirth, purification, inner light, the sacred center, union, and return. They do this not to create confusion, but to become more sensitive to the deep grammar of spiritual life. If you want, leave a comment with this question in mind. Do you think the world's traditions are pointing to one truth through different languages, or are the differences too deep to say that? I am genuinely curious where you stand, because this is one of those subjects that reveals a lot about how we see reality itself. And now we come back to the question from the beginning. Were the great traditions of humanity competing, or were they circling a center too bright to stare at directly? The perennial philosophy answers in a very precise way. It says the center is real. The rays are many. The symbols differ. The rites differ. The doctrines differ. But for those capable of seeing beyond the surface without dishonoring the surface, a pattern appears. Reality is layered. The soul is more than its passing identity. Truth is not invented by history, only refracted through it. Maybe that is why this idea has never completely disappeared. In every age of confusion, someone rediscovers it. Someone notices that beneath myth, theology, philosophy, initiation, and symbol, there remains a memory of something primordial. Not old, merely in time, but permanent in principle. And maybe the real secret was never hidden because it was owned by elites alone. Maybe it stays hidden because most people look for spiritual truth as information, while the traditions themselves demand transformation. If this video gave you a new way to understand the hidden thread running through religion, philosophy, and esotericism, subscribe, share it with someone who would actually appreciate this kind of depth, and watch the playlist on screen. Now, because this subject does not end here. Once you begin seeing the connections, you start noticing them everywhere, and the next video may help you recognize another piece of the same forgotten pattern.